we are Baltimore positive, and happy holidays, everybody out there. We're down here at Fadley's in Lexington Market. I've gone from Tokyo Market to Lexington Market, Don
My
Mullen.
goodness, you've been
back and forth.
traveling the world.
Well, you know, it was extra pressure on United Airlines and Southwest to get me back when I knew that I had Police Commissioner Michael S. Harrison here. You brought me the color version of the crime reduction. I've gotten the black and white and the printed version because I've come out into the neighborhood down here Cross Street. I live in the 21202 down at the Inner Harbor, and I've heard you talk about all of this stuff, but I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you today, Fadley's, and learning more about what the plan is to make our city better because, as you can tell from the hats and the shirts, we're Baltimore positive, Commissioner.
Absolutely. Nothing but the best for you.
And while we're here, Nestor,
look out. Here we
Commissioner
go. Here we
is going
go.
to be eating. I know you like to show off the food.
All right. Well, you know, he asked for something that may have been sort of like New Orleans, but you're New Orleans. Seafood's like part of your nature, right? Like this is not a reach for you to go for a Maryland crab cake,
It's
right?
not a reach for me. I eat it. And look, here's the thing I'll tell you about New Orleans food. If you can kill it before it died, I eat it. All right.
Well, a pleasure to have you here, and you know we had so many things to talk about. We wanted to have you on. Obviously, with the election cycle coming and everything happening in our city, I live here. The reason this thing began of 30 years of doing sports radio for me was I want to make Baltimore better. And sports has been a part of my life for 30 years. I've lived downtown for 2 decades. Crime has been on the tongue of every politician here, every person, every business owner. And it comes to you. This is why I went out and watched you speak a few weeks ago, because I care a lot. Everyone that's vested with a brick here cares. And you sort of flew into this situation year ago. You know, give me a little update on where you are and getting settled here in Baltimore.
Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you for the invitation, for being here. Thank you for
being here.
Thank you for this great meal that I'm going to dive into in just a few minutes. You know, my wife and I are really enjoying it. We found that there are a lot of similarities, although there are a lot of differences. What we find is that right now we are changing this department from the inside out, and we're building capacity to be able to make the department an effective and efficient police department, because we lacked the capacity and the coordination to do so many things and to do them at such a high level. And yes, we're dealing with a culture of violence. And so it's not just that people are committing violence, but it's actually a culture where people think, by and large, young men are committing violent acts using handguns and using firearms. That's a culture, because the decision to use a gun and to pull that trigger is not made when the trigger is pulled. The decision to pull that trigger is made when you leave home with that gun. When you walk out of the door with it, you've already made a decision that if I need it, I have it, and if I have it, I'll have to use it. So we have to change that culture. Now, we are working to change 2 things: a culture of violence in the city and a culture of performance in a police department. Because we're under a consent decree, which means the federal government is making us, by way of an agreement with the government, to change and reform and transform every part of our department, everything we do and the way we do it, all the way from the way we recruit, hire, train, staff, deploy. We have to do it in a constitutional way, because we've been accused of doing it in an unconstitutional way. So we're working to fix a department and increase capacity through human capacity, through technology, while at the same time dealing with a community that has a culture of violence, a high level of mistrust with the police department, and to overcome that while at the same time helping people feel safe and actually be safe. So we're adjusting well. We are Baltimoreans. We live here. We're not going anywhere. We're totally submerged into being Baltimoreans now. We're enjoying it. There is a lot of work to do, but there are great men and women in the police department who are up for the challenge. There are great partners we have who are up for the challenge. I think the thing we're up against now is coordinating all of the efforts of all the people working in other police departments, prosecutors, state and federal agencies, state agencies, schools, churches, neighborhood associations, and civic groups. How do we take all the efforts and coordinate them and synchronize them into one effort, which is what has been missing here, which is my main observation, which is what we're working to build now. 9 months in, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm beginning to see the change. I can see the attitudes of the officers and the rank and file beginning to change. And they're beginning to perform in a different way because they see it. Many of them get it. And then there's some that takes a little extra work. But 9 months in, I'm actually seeing little subtle changes in the way people perform because there are subtle changes in the way they think and the way they see the crime problem and the issues with our police department.
This is not a new challenge for you, Commissioner. When all of us were following your career, many of us in New Orleans, I joked when the mayor tapped you to come to Baltimore City as county executive in Baltimore County, I knew at some point we were going to need to be replacing a police chief, or the next exec was going to be needing to replace the police chief. And I was sort of compiling a short list of folks who appeared to have outstanding resumes in the nation, and were doing the hard work. You were on that short list, so I can remember joking with the mayor. I said, well, that's one name we won't be looking at in Baltimore County. So you built up this reputation in New Orleans, and when I look, you really grew up there fighting, and I don't know if there's a nice way to say this, fighting dirty cops. I mean, when I read that, I'm thinking, this is the stuff of movies. I mean, you're in a drug bust, you're wearing a wire. It sounds dangerous as can be to me. So,
well, tell me these stories, because this is where, I would think when you come in from the outside, you're an outsider here, right? And that's the hardest thing in the world to be, I think. But it's also, that's where change happens, is where when you're bringing new ideas in, and you have all of this experience, including a hurricane in New Orleans. That I was there the night before the hurricane. The Ravens played the last game in the Dome before the hurricane.
That's right. So those experiences really helped shape my career there. As a young officer, young narcotics detective, coming up and finding that in much of the work I was doing to bring about justice and to rid our city of drug dealers, we were finding that there were many police officers then in the early 90s involved in that work and protecting them. And so one of you may have heard this, one of the proudest moments for me and the most integral pieces of work I've had to produce was actually going undercover as a corrupt police officer to catch the city's biggest drug dealer, but at the same time catching all of the police officers that were working to protect him. And I had to do that. And then I spent 9+ years in the Internal Affairs Unit working to make sure that our department was self-policing itself and that we were doing our best to rid the department of its bad apples and making sure that we built trust with our community because we were holding ourselves accountable. But it was the work that in my younger years, helping, not being afraid, but helping the department to identify its bad apples that actually led me to go work in internal affairs and really shaped how my career would go.
For those of you listening on the radio, not tuning into the podcast, we're with Baltimore City Police Commissioner Michael Harrison, talking about the challenges ahead and really the successes of his past. If we jump back to the New Orleans story, because I saw Nestor's eyes get about as big as plates when we talked about you going undercover, getting the biggest drug dealer in New Orleans, taking on dirty cops. I'm trying to think, talk to me. You've been married, you married your high school sweetheart, you have 2 children, you got a family. Talk to me about the personal emotions at that moment when you're in a very dangerous situation, taking on the city's biggest drug dealer, and at the same time doing something that I can imagine wasn't really popular among a lot of police officers, and that is opening the door to police corruption. You knew it was the right thing to do, but I guess there were those in the department who didn't look kindly upon you doing that.
Well, at the time it's happening, nobody knew. And so only at the point of people getting arrested and then consulting with their attorneys did they actually find out how they came to be arrested and in trouble. And the reality is cops usually have a high regard and a high level of respect for other honest police officers. They really have a high regard for that. So while it may seem like it's unpopular to do, but then you build the respect of the honest, hardworking police officers. And so it felt bad. There's a difference, and I teach my people this all the time, the difference between being bad and feeling bad. It's only something that felt bad. And if you can get get past your fear, which it took a long time, and then it's very lonely because you lose friends and people begin to not trust you because they think because you're that honest guy, they should not be around you for fear that if they did something wrong around you, you would report it, they'd get in trouble. So it becomes lonely. But in that loneliness, you begin to depend on your faith, my faith in God, my family.
You're a minister, correct?
I am. I am not a pastor, but a minister.
Right.
And your faith in God, my trust and reliance in my family to be there for me. And then, going back to school, investing in education, and then going back again, and then going back again, and then building your career. And so out of that loneliness is, builds ambition to overcome it, ambition to rise up and to want to effect change. And everything that I ever saw that I thought I didn't agree with, or that I thought could be done better, not that it was wrong, but that I could do it better. I worked to rise up in the department so that someday I could have some input on how to change that. And, that worked for me. But it was those situations that really kind of gave me the inspiration and motivation to kind of rise above the people who walked away from friendships because they thought, I was doing something different and they didn't want to be a part of that. Well, my solution was, let's rise above it. I'll become their boss, and I can take the department to where I thought it should go.
Well, I have an amazing amount of respect for anybody that picks up their life after I've been in Baltimore my whole life. I'm 51. I've been doing this for 30 years. The notion that I would pick up and go take over the New Orleans sports station or the New Orleans anything and move, the thought about coming here, I wear a Baltimore hat everywhere I go. I was in Tokyo yesterday. I was in Seoul, South Korea over the week. I was in L.A. I had someone yell at me about the Ravens in the Tokyo airport because we're pretty good right now, as you know.
Yes, we are.
No, maybe it's Saints in us. Who knows before it's all over? It could be.
Could be.
But the reputation of Baltimore, the wire, all of that goes along with it. For you to take on this assignment and come here and say, I'm going to go to a place where there's been corruption, where there's been Freddie Gray, where there's been consent decree, to make that decision with your life. A lot of police departments. Don was talking about Baltimore County police. A lot of counties all over the country where you could have gone. Why here? The notion of where we are and a citizen like me that would look to a guy from Louisiana and say, come clean this place up because we need it cleaned up.
Well, you asked the question, why here? Congressman Elijah Cummings asked me that question in our first meeting, which was in my first week. My answer to him was, why not here? Do you not think that you deserve a great police chief? Do
Absolutely.
you not think? So, and people would ask that question, why here? My answer is always, why not here? And I really don't go into it. What I will say is that when Baltimore was looking for a police chief, of course, I was doing well in New Orleans and things were going great. I was not looking for a different job. It was when things kind of fell apart, then I became someone who was recruited. So I wasn't looking for it. I was actually recruited. And then it really put things in perspective, me asking questions, what's the next step for me in my career? What's the next level for me in my life, for my family and me? And where should my career go? This was a wonderful opportunity.
Did you know anyone here?
I didn't know anyone here.
No one.
Well, I knew one or two persons from here. The previous police chief Kevin Davis. I knew we had met a few times. I knew a few people on his team who had traveled to New Orleans to study our consent decree. So I knew a few people. But here's what I will say: when I hear about Baltimore, and the fixation over the number 300 murders, which is horrible. One is too many. Right. But we've been talking about the number 300 with our population of 600,000. Well, I can remember when New Orleans had 500,000 and had 496 murders 2 years in a row. Then I remember a time over a 10-year period, the governor, the mayor, 4 council members, a senator, and a sitting congressman all went to prison. So when I think about it, I tell myself, this is not that bad.
We can do this.
This is not that bad. And my wife is a great supporter, is my biggest champion. And so I have seen a murder rate far beyond what we are now. I've seen a police officer ordered the murder of a witness who made a complaint against him. A police officer who killed her partner. We worked through all of that in New Orleans. And so as I look at Baltimore, I tell myself, I've been through worse, and this is not that bad.
What did you learn in New Orleans, Commissioner? Again, we're with Police Commissioner, Baltimore City Police Commissioner Michael Harrison, taking time out from his busy schedule to sit with Nestor and me on Baltimore Positive. Looking back at your experience in New Orleans, what did you learn about leading a large police department, and what do you bring here from there, and how have you grown since New Orleans?
I've learned that people are looking for strong, consistent, competent and honest leadership. But many people don't know what leadership is, much less what competence and honesty, and people don't always know what that is. Many people do, but there's some who don't. But people are looking for that even though they don't really know what it is. But when they see it, they know it. And that means that the leader has to be confident in his or her own ability, has to have a strong support, has to do the right thing all the time because it is the right thing to do. I don't make any decisions for any political reasons because I don't know anybody. I don't owe any favors. I'm not beholden to any person or group. I am free to do the right thing for the right reason. And I'm comfortable because I want to be here, not that I need to be here. I have a full 29-year pension waiting for me. And so I could be anywhere in the world I want to be, but I want to be here because I want to be able to help and offer the lessons learned in a city that was troubled, just like we are facing these troubles, and we overcame it. And then I tell people, you are in the present looking into the future, and you don't really know what you see. I'm in the future looking back saying, I know exactly what I see because I've seen it before. And we can overcome this. There are things that have to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. It's not just police. There are all types of stakeholders, and all disciplines have to come together to work collectively to fix this. But I bring the lessons learned of being true to what I know is right and doing that all the time, regardless of who's in charge, regardless of what people think they want. I bring the lessons learned because I've seen it done, and not be influenced by outside influences that will try to take you left or right, wherever the politics may want it to go.
So I met Don in August of 1982. He was my high school guidance counselor, right? So that was a few years ago, all right? It's 37 years ago.
You made a big impact on him.
So Don told me for the very first time, because I never got called into the principal's office with him. I was one of the truth seekers, in Dundalk High School. Don taught me a lesson a couple weeks ago, right? We talked about this in episode number 100. Tell him what your rule is when a troubled child would come into your office. You would say, the truth is your friend. The truth is your friend.
That's it. Right.
That was his. The truth is your friend.
The truth is your friend.
When we see these Baltimore Sun exposés from a few years ago about dirty cops and in our community, when you come in to Baltimore and you don't know anyone, trying to figure out who's truthful, where the honesty is, we have officers. I see officers at Ravens games that I've seen for 25 years. We have a lot of people in the Baltimore City Force that have been there a long, long time, that have been through many police commissioners. I got a police commissioner doing morning radio down the street at another place. For you to come in and see this, what is truth on a street corner in West Baltimore where the citizens don't trust you because of the badge? I look at you and think you're protecting me. There's a large part of the population here that thinks that you're not here to protect them.
Well, first of all, there are many great men and women of this police department who show up every day, man, with it on their mind to go just do a good job. There is, just like there is a culture of violence in the community, over time we have built up what's called a culture of accountability, or a lack of accountability. Right. And the lack of accountability created a culture in the agency where managers weren't managing, supervisors weren't supervising, and when they did, there was retaliation within the agency against people who managed. And so those management principles begin to break down, and as experienced leaders, honest leaders, left the agency through retirement or otherwise, that culture of unaccountability began to grow. And it's because there were not good systems of accountability in place through both human capacity and technology, that when officers make a mistake and it doesn't get reported and then we cover it up, those things begin to grow from mistakes to intentional things. And then here's what happens. Because we are out there and we're dealing with a culture of violence and we help each other. I save your life today, I save your life tomorrow. Before long, I'm best man in your wedding, I'm godfather to your children. Cops, loan each other money to pay car notes, to pay tuition for the children, to pay each other's mortgages. So when we do that for each other, there are bonds that form, that are naturally forming, that are so strong that when one of us makes a mistake, we think, well, you've paid my mortgage for the last 3 months because I'm having hard times. I owe you the courtesy of helping you.
I can't be a witness against you.
Right. That is the culture that happens in every law enforcement agency. Now, the way to overcome that is to create a reward system and an intervention system that allows officers to step in front of their colleagues so that they don't make the mistakes in the very first place. That's what we're changing here in Baltimore, so that we don't have to worry about covering things up on the back end and lying and getting in trouble for lying, but rather we help each other not make the mistake in the very first place. That's the culture that we have. That's the culture of accountability that we're working to build. That's on the way. That's actually happening. It's slow, but it's actually happening.
Well, Commissioner, it's interesting, and I know we're coming up on a break, but you talked about accountability.
Yes.
And one of the components that I was struck by in your crime plan was the use of data, and everyone agrees, and the Sun Paper's written a lot about it. Everyone agrees that data is important. But what I saw that was interesting in your proposal was that you said you've got to track the right kind of information, and that traditionally a lot of police departments across the country have been tracking the wrong type of data. Talk a little bit about what that means.
So, the CompStat process originally in the 90s was about crime, and over the years it has remained about crime. What I did in New Orleans and what we're doing now is taking the CompStat process, and we're not just looking at crime, but we're looking at all facets of management. We're looking at risk management, we're looking at planning and staffing and scheduling and budgeting and resource allocation and crime and community engagement and community policing and all the data that informs us about the management capacity and will of command and of people who are supposed to be in charge. And not just looking at here's crime, here's what you do about the crime, but rather how do you manage and lead people in all of these efforts. And we want to realize who the actual bad actors are, and through crime analysis, we can now link people, to places, to things, to days, times, events, and we can link things to things, like guns to other guns, and guns to people, and guns to events. And so we're now using crime analysis with professional analysts, not police officers, but rather professional analysts who are certified to mine data and comb data to tell us who the bad actors are, and then we can create the appropriate strategy on how to target those individuals instead of having the fishnet approach of grabbing everybody and then trying to figure out who the bad actors are.
We talk so much about technology. We'll take a break. We have Police Commissioner Michael S. Harrison. We're at Fadley's. He's about to have a crab cake. I'm going to let you get to that before it gets cold, right?
We got to have his crab cake. We got to thank our other sponsors.
We're going to be at Jennings soon. By the way, I had the worst hamburger ever at LAX. So, Steve, I'm coming over soon. And Evan, I'm coming to see you over at State Fair as well.
The chicken and waffles are waiting for you at State
2020.
Fair.
It's going to be great. We have Speaker of the House Adrian Jones coming up. We have Wes Moore coming up for Baltimore Positive. We're here with Police Commissioner Michael Harrison as well. And technology is up next.
We're going to dive into the crime
Segment 2, episode 100 and something. We're at Fadley's.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. We are Baltimore Positive at WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST, Baltimore Positive.